Good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. This is the Energy and Environment Committee, and I'm joined by Councilmember Koretz. We are expecting two other council members, and we'll acknowledge their presence when they arrive. And we have several items today, about 6 items today, and we could get started with the first.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Council Member. Ratepayer Operator with the CLA's office. Item number 1 relates to Executive Director of the OPA to report relative to the status and implementation of his office. We have Dr. Frederick Pickle here, as well as the CAO's office, Bill Koenig.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, we're here to get a status on the implementation of the office, and I'm sure my colleagues will have some questions afterwards, but if you could just give us an overview of the status of the implementation of the office.
Certainly. I'm Fred Pickle, Executive Director, Office of Public Accountability and Ratepayer Advocate.
1 second. We have just been joined by Councilmember Cardenas and Councilmember Zine. As they take their seats, we will begin the presentation, and just to let my colleagues know, we are just beginning.
Where's mine?
Right.
That's me.
We are beginning item number 1, so we're off.
Okay, thank you very much. Congressman. Thank you for waiting, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Mr. Pickle.
You've asked for a brief status update. The office is now building its organization. I've been working with the CAO's office, the CLA, and the Personnel Department to identify and develop appropriate position descriptions and start the search processes. We have also been working to define the OPA Ratepayer Advocate function. In doing that, we're working with the CLA, the City Attorney, and the CAO to develop a report supporting an implementation ordinance. And we will report back on that in the next few weeks. We're also working to establish space and develop interim support. The CAO's office is providing space and support at City Hall East at the current time. Larry Stern, an ex-CAO staffer, has just come on board to help temporarily. And we have space at Figueroa Plaza that appears to be almost ready. The council has also previously approved a budget for the remainder of this fiscal year, and next year's budget will be part of the mayor's proposal. Also during this time period, we've been doing outreach and communication efforts. There are regular meetings with DWP, and I've also had meetings with your office, Mr. Huizar, with a council office event with Councilmember Buscaino in the Harbor area, and it included neighborhood council representatives from that area. I've had a meeting with a California PUC commissioner who was the lead ratepayer advocate in the state before he became a commissioner. I've had a meeting or 2 meetings with the Neighborhood Council Memorandum of Understanding group. I've met with a major industrial customer and have had meet and greet introductions to DWP commissioners. In addition, I've recently had a meeting with 2 environmental advocates and have more such meetings planned. And I've stayed in touch with the mayor's staff.
Great, thank you. And so I guess the big question is, as you know, the DWP will most likely launch some proposed new rate hikes in the next few weeks. Do you have a backup plan should you not be staffed up and ready to properly analyze these the proposal?
I do. This year's budget and next year's have funds for contracted support, and we're going to start by relying on existing support from PA Consulting that's already contracted through the CAO and CLA. and we will likely seek some additional help. Those funds, as I've said, are part of the budget now. Staffing won't be complete by the time this is underway, although it will be proceeding in parallel.
But you feel you'll be in a position to provide the council and the public proper analysis and information to move forward?
Assuming we can work out an appropriate time frame for the study period.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Koretz, and we'll work our way this way.
So I know at one point there was some lack of clarity on this. Is there a difference between the ratepayer advocate and the executive director? Who will be doing the ratepayer advocacy formally in your little department?
The office as a whole will be doing the ratepayer advocacy.
So there won't be one person identified as, quote, the ratepayer advocate, or with you given that specific primary function?
No, it will be the office itself.
And when the next rate increase is proposed, will you be able to fully analyze it and make recommendations in a timely fashion?
Again, assuming we work out a reasonable schedule for the analysis period, yes.
And if it wound up only being you,
we would have...
And your consultant, would you be able to still provide us enough analysis to rely on?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Mr. Cardenas?
Thank you very much. You have one of the most interesting jobs in town, I think, but it is important, and I do want to ask you, have you been able to formulate in your own mind what kind of time you would need to be able to do the kind of due diligence and the kind of analysis that it appears that you've been hired to do? I mean, I don't think you can do an analysis. Personally, I don't think anybody can do an analysis on rate increases for the largest municipal water and power district in the country in a couple of weeks. I mean, I think it would be kind of hard to do that independently and to be able to feel comfortable and confident that your presentation at the end of your analysis would have been robust enough to give us the information we need as decision makers.
No, I can't do that in a couple of weeks. The Public Utilities Commission staff now has an 8-month period for which the Division of Ratepayer Advocates has from the start of the rate-making process to the time they deliver their report.
Mm-hmm.
And their staff is fully established. Now, they have to cover some issues that we don't.
Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say that in order for, should and when the department staff and the commission deliberate over a rate increase, and then your job is to analyze that the prospect of such, it is the kind of thing that, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, is going to be in the timeline of months, not weeks.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Months, not weeks.
So one of the interesting things about what the department and you are faced with now that you're both on the dance floor when it comes to rate increases is that the voters voted for this just over a year ago. On March 8th, 2011, they voted to have the OPA created, and here we are a year later, and the department has publicly let us know they've been holding off on their presentation and wish to have a comprehensive rate evaluation and a proposed rate increase. So that kind of makes it difficult for, once again, for the largest department of water and power in the country to go through their own analysis, make the proposal, allow for enough time for the OPA to do their work. We're already at the end of March. We might be talking about the end of summer, maybe the end of the year, depending on how complicated the analysis has to be. What do you think about that when it comes to, and I have to ask you this question because I'm sure it's not lost on you with all your 30-plus years of experience in the industry that sometimes that could be a bit of an issue for an operating organization.
The way the industry deals with some of those challenges, and this is a discussion that I haven't had with DWP yet, I would like to have that as part of it, is, as part of our discussions before they file, is in some jurisdictions, rate increases are granted subject to refund on some or part of what's being done. So that may be a way of addressing some of this. So the parts that aren't in dispute or don't need substantial additional review can go ahead, for example. And another component can be granted subject to refund, or the increase not be granted for that component until it's fully reviewed.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you giving that example. I think that's an excellent example, because I think that some voters are under the assumption that the fact that we have an OPA now means that there won't be any increases, because all that shenanigans and that idea of getting the customers to pay more money is going to end. And
I think the hardest part of my job, and probably an even harder part of the DWP's job, is integrating in an economic way all the mandates that have been placed on the utility industry. DWP isn't alone, but the California utilities are talking about a period of increases of 7% per year over an extended period, which is certainly not going to lower rates. And it's driven by the desire to reduce carbon in emissions and improve renewables.
So let me help you a little bit here. For those people listening, they heard the word rebate. They shouldn't get excited. Nobody's rebating anybody right now, anything.
That would be a rebate in the increase.
Sure.
Perhaps.
Perhaps, if there is an increase in the future. But at the same time, when you're talking about what a department like the LA Department of Water and Power is faced with regulations, even internal goals of carbon reduction, et cetera, I just want to make it clear, I don't interpret your comments as advocating rate increases. I interpret your comments as just stating some facts that are beyond our control here locally, that are imposed on us, and/or facts, political facts, where the politicians, be it mayors or council members or even the board, would say we want to aggressively move away from our carbon emission level, which I don't know of anybody so far who's been able to prove that they can do that without having an increased cost to the ratepayer. Correct? I mean, on a grand scale. Obviously,
we would love to see it.
There's minutia. Maybe somebody gets lucky where they had a very expensive plant and they closed that down and they went to cleaner energy, and that kind of anomaly, there might be a dip. But what I'm saying is, on average, on the when we're looking at cleaner production of energy, or green energy as some people have labeled it, on average, it tends to cause the need for it is more expensive to produce. Therefore, by the time it's delivered, the entities it's delivered to, be business or residential, end up paying higher for it, because it's just the fact of life that, on average, it tends to be a more expensive product.
Yes.
On the front end.
But the energy industry has survived in the long term by innovating. But that innovation takes decades, not years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Zine?
Thank you. As Mr. Cardenas mentioned, it was March 8th, 2011, that the OPA was established. And here we are, still trying to put the operation together. How many staff have you hired into the operation?
I have a search ongoing for an administrative assistant, and over 30 resumes in hand. We're going to begin interviewing in the next week.
Okay.
We're working on position descriptions that we've tried to use existing city descriptions, but they don't fit these positions very well.
Right.
We're trying to work through that process with the advice of the CAO's office and the personnel department.
And how are you handling the managed hiring process? Is there an exemption for what you're trying to do, or do you have to go through that managed hiring process? CAO CLA? And if it is that case, how do we expedite that so we can get this thing moving forward?
Bill Koenig, CAO's office, CAO's office, excuse me. Our position, staff position, is that because of the urgency, because the charter mandated activities that were associated with this, and the fact that it is fully reimbursed by Water and Power, we would recommend that it not be subjected to managed hiring for that specific purpose. We're trying to expedite this activity.
And the concern I have is that the day you were appointed and confirmed by the council, the next day, water rates went up. No disrespect to you. And I was a no vote on that. And I said I'm going to stay a no vote on whatever Water and Power wants to do to increase rates until we can get what the voters approved, this position, ratepayer advocate, in place to make those recommendations. Because it seems that we have a budget for a position to review that independent analysis and review when it comes to Water and Power rates. And if we go ahead and say we're going to increase this, going to increase that, what do we need OPA for? I mean, the bottom line is the voters supported this with the understanding and the commitment that it would be an independent analysis and review, and then we could debate which way we're going to go, up or down the ladder. So I've got some concerns on the time it took for the city to find you and put you in the pickle that you're in now. We've talked about that before. But it's like the squeeze is coming, and you've got to have the personnel to get the job done. In the meantime, Water and Power says, well, we need this and we need that, and the state mandates and the federal mandates. And then the voters say, wait a second, we supported something, and we don't want to betray them and what we were committed to when the position was established. I know you've got great credentials, great resume, you've been around a long time, you know how it's done, but the city needs to step up and give you the tools you need so you can get your job done in an expeditious manner.
The city has been doing a good job at that.
Okay. So when do you feel comfortable in having somebody in place to say, okay, now you've got a ship and you're the captain, you don't have anyone on the ship except you. You can't take care of it yourself. When's the rest of the crew, you think, on board?
One, the consulting support is already available to the city, and I'm coordinating with the CLA and CAO's office on that.
Okay.
So the base layer is there. To get additional staff will take a couple months,
So the Water and Power
in my
Department.
hope, in my dreams. But
So then Water and Power should be informed if they want to increase some rates on one side or the other, they need to recognize that your position, not fully staffed, can't make any recommendations.
I wouldn't say that. I think through the consulting support and partial staffing, we can get the job done.
You can make recommendations, even though you're not fully operational.
Yes.
Well, that assures me and the public that obviously we're moving forward, and that's the point we want to be forward. So when this controversy takes place, and I heard 7% per year, which would create a lot of unhappiness for a whole lot of people, especially the folks in the valley that pay much higher rates because of the consumption of power in the summer and water throughout the year. Okay. And what about an organizational chart? Do you know when we'll be able to see somewhat of an organizational chart?
In addition to the administrative assistant, we're seeing a group of, beyond myself, 4 other professionals.
Okay.
Someone handling community outreach and community affairs with both council offices and neighborhood councils and the public, and 3 individuals with varying levels of expertise in the utility industry in matters related to rates, regulation, and finance.
And have they established a budget for you yet?
Yes.
What is that budget?
The budget for the remainder of this year is $691,000. And the budget for next year is will be released in the mayor's proposal.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you. So bottom line, your office feels that you will be able to provide us with some information before the next proposed, with sufficient time to review the next proposed rate increase, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
provided we have a reasonable schedule. We're working that out with DWP. But to appropriately review rates in the long term, we see there are 7 separate processes that are necessary. The overall rate levels, or revenue requirements, as they're called in the industry, is the one we've been talking about here. But beyond that, we have rate structures, or how the different customer classes pay, how people in the valley pay versus people in other climate zones. We have to participate in the draft budget comments. I think an important aspect is handled ad hoc now, but we may want to formalize more, is the review of specific projects, programs, and procurement plans. It's typically called a certificate of need process in other regulatory jurisdictions. Review any updates to the integrated resource plan, and then the charter also provides for a role in complaints. And with a staff of the size of this group, you have to be very selective in what you take on. And inevitably, there will be other duties.
And so, as far as you can tell, the city has been doing all it can to work with you to ramp up and work as quickly as possible. Anything that this committee or the council can help you with to expedite anything?
I think I'm set for the time being. We will be back in a few weeks with a report on the implementation ordinance.
The CAO and CLA want to say something. So
Yes, Bill Koenig, CAO's office. The initial budget that the council approved in December of this year provided the beginning of the fundings and authorization to hire Dr. Pickle. It is fully expected there will be a request coming to the council in the very near future to provide additional employment authority for the staff once it is identified, and to potentially move into different accounts some of those funds that have already been provided. It's expected sufficient funds will be available. We might have to move them around.
Okay.
So it will necessitate council approval for that.
Okay. Yes, CLA?
So the staffing component, Mr. Chair, the staffing component is a piece of it, but the other component may be the introduction of a motion for the piggyback component of the contract, so we could have staff available at his disposal to do that review.
Okay.
So we may approach your office on that.
And I'm sure we would support that. I anticipate the council would support that. It's an issue of timing and how quickly we can do it. So anything that you need to make us aware about in terms of timing, let us know. And we'll get that going. Okay. Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you, Mr. Pickle, and thank you for taking this on.
Mr. Chair, note and file for now, or continue for 30 days, 45 days?
Let's continue it for 30 days to get an update on where we are with getting the office up to speed and going.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2 relates to DWP report, CAO report relative to proposed ordinance that amends the ad code for the purchase of renewable energy and associated interconnection agreements. This matter also includes a presentation from the DWP relative to its feed and tariff program and the interconnection proposal. Representatives from DWP include Ms. Ann Wood, Mike Webster, and Olivia Seves Villalongo with the CAO's office.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mike Webster. I'm Assistant Director of the Power System Planning and Development Division. And what we want to do today is give you a short presentation about the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff program is for renewable energy, local, that's connected to our grid that then we can redistribute to all of our customers. And what's before you is an ordinance to help streamline the process. So this process is going to be less costly from an administrative perspective. We believe it will actually lower the cost of the projects that will be proposed to us. And equally important, it will help us speed up the deployment of the feed-in tariff program. And the vision right now is to start with a very, very small demonstration program to test the process, which has been included in our financial plan. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to learn from that. But we'd like to use the information gained and then help inform in a discussion of a much larger feed-in tariff program to the tune of 75 megawatts to 150 megawatts down the road. So the ordinance delegates some authority to help that streamlining to happen. So I'd like to introduce Ann Wood, who will walk us through the feed-in tariff program, some of the history and where we are recommending we go in the future.
Hi, thank you. So the feed-in tariff program objectives is first to comply with the state mandate SD 32, which states that LADWP must offer at minimum a 75 megawatt feed-in tariff program so that solar generators or other renewable generators can generate and sell all of that electricity back to our grid. And another objective that LADWP has for the FIT program is to create another mechanism to augment the existing solar incentive program that we have, which is projected to run out of commercial funding by this year. So the difference between feed-in tariff and solar incentive program, the solar incentive program, the customer installs their solar generators and consumes that energy, and any excess is given credit to be used on future electric bills. So a very important objective of the program is also to be able to have a reliable, cost-effective, dependable, sustainable, and streamlined program. And it's very important to us to maintain a reliable system that we have right now, and a cost-effective program will allow us to get the best value for our customers. And there are other existing feed-in tariff programs out there that are just in name only. With ours, we would like for projects that sign up with us to actually build the generators and give us the renewable energy that we will need for our RPS goals. And a great thing about the feed-in tariff program, as Mike mentioned earlier, it's for generators within our service territory. And what that does is it will reduce distribution and transmission losses. And with feed-in tariff, it will provide us geographic diversity and technology diversity, and that's important for reliability in the sense that if you have your solar spread out geographically, if a cloud comes over, it will only affect a small portion of our solar generation. And having technology diversity, we think because of the urban makeup of LA area, that most of these generators will be solar, and they will complement the existing wind energy that we have right now. Because solar generates in the day, and as it goes away, wind tends to pick up, and it is generated at night. And another good thing about feed-in tariff, since it is local, it will provide local economic development, which is what LA needs right now. So up here, we have key highlights on the outreach efforts that we have made in 2011. But I would like to note that prior to 2011, we were fortunate enough to meet German delegators and Spanish delegators, and they shared with us their lesson learned on their program, which has been in existence for over a decade. And right now, they have been very successful at installing gigawatts of solar energy. But that came with high pricing, boom and bust cycles, and integration issues. And since they have shared that with us, we have incorporated those issues. We have incorporated ways of installing generators without having those issues. And what we have done is we met in 2011 with our customers, our developers, and stakeholders such as environmental groups, labor union, and business leaders to garnish their feedback on how the program should be to make it successful. And we have incorporated the feedback into the demonstration program. So what's the purpose of the demonstration program? We propose to start out with 10 megawatts to test program structure and fine-tune program elements. Per the feedback received during outreach, we have set aside allocations to determine customer interest, pricing, and locations of these projects. So out of the 10 megawatts, 8 megawatts will be for large systems, which range in sizing of 151 to 999 kilowatt, and these 8 megawatts will be for the LA basin. And the other 2 megawatts of the 10 will be for the smaller projects, ranging in 30 to 150 kilowatt. And of the small project range, 1.7 megawatts of that will be for the LA basin, and 300 kilowatts will be for our Owens Valley territory. So
So let me interject here for a second, is that the main purpose of the demonstration is really for that price and process discovery, because it will help us actually design a future program to meet the goals of SB 32 in the state to ramp from at least to 75 megawatts up to 150 megawatts. It also gives us the opportunity to interact with other city departments to make sure that the processes are working correctly. So that's why we want to do the demonstration program.
Okay.
You can go to the next slide.
All right. So how does the demonstration program parallel with the timing of a full feed-in tariff program? Well, as we work through the application process, then we will learn what the customer's interests are and the pricing necessary for these different size projects. We will use this information right away to develop the full feed-in tariff program. For the demonstration program, we will utilize competition to set the fixed pricing for the 20-year contract. And there's a range of options to be considered with policymakers and stakeholders for the pricing mechanism for the full feed-in tariff. And the outcome of the demonstration program will help guide the decision. And we plan to offer the next round of the 75 megawatts in January 2013, with possibly expanding the 75 to 150 megawatts. And the decision for the expansion is dependent on lessons learned from the demonstration, the level of interest that we have, and the power rates, which all should be known by the 1st of 2013. So this takes me back to today's agenda, which Mike has mentioned earlier, which is to seek ordinance for delegated authority. The proposed ordinance comes with set program limits. And so it will only authorize LADWP to enter into long-term contracts for a program of up to 150 megawatts and with a system size cap of 3 megawatts. The pricing per contract shall not exceed $300 per megawatt hour, which means 30 cents per kilowatt hour.
And so the $300 is really an upper limit. It's to enable the experiment to occur in this demonstration program and really will allow for small carve-outs, if that's the direction that this council wants to go, is that it just allows for that type of pricing. We do not envision in any way that the average cost of program will even be close to this level.
Yes. And so the interconnection agreement and the contracts for the program are standard contracts and they're non-negotiable. The only thing that will change on the contract are the names, the renewable technology, the size of the renewable project, and the pricing of the project. So with that, prior to entering the contracts for this ordinance, a board-approved fit demonstration program must be in place for the first phase, and an approved full feed-in tariff program for the later phases. So to effectively run a feed-in tariff program, The ordinance must be adopted since it will not be feasible to bring hundreds of possible standard contracts and interconnection agreements for council approval in an efficient and timely manner. This ordinance, if not passed, we project a 4-month delay for the participants to commit to such things as ordering of material and equipment and hiring of installers and administrators for their project. This will result in uncertainty for the participants, which will then lead to additional barriers and increased costs for projects. And so preparing an estimated 30 to 40 contracts and agreements for a 10 megawatt program and hundreds for the full program for council approval will result in additional costs and administration for LADWP. So the impact of no ordinance goes against our guiding principle, which is having a streamlined process. And we heard loud and clear during our outreach effort last year that streamlining is a must for a successful program.
And so you've seen the schedule before, and we can answer questions related to this. The key point, and it's hard to see in this schedule itself, but we do not have to wait until the demonstration program's done before we start discussions on a 75 megawatt program or even a 150 megawatt program. We intend to actually start that in the summer as soon as we get some price and process discovery. And with that, I think we'd like to open this up for any questions that you might have of us.
Sure. First of all, what percentage is this 75 megawatts of the entire DWP power generation system?
75 megawatts, well, without calculating percentage, our peak capacity in our system is 7,200 megawatts.
Okay, and so a majority, or if not all, of the 75 megawatts are going to solar installations. Is that a viable strategy?
Well, in our integrated resource plan that was published in 2010 and updated in 2011, there's about 1,000 megawatts of solar energy that we need on our system. And so 75 or 150 megawatts locally is a reasonable proportion of that total amount.
Okay. And the length of the agreements that you will have with the contractors is 25 years. Why 25 years?
It's really, the 25 years is a term, but the actual contract is 20 years. So what happens is that the 20 years pretty much matches the warranty period of the solar panels. But we sign a contract, then they have to procure the materials and build it, so they may be in an 18 to 2 month time period while they're building their facility before they actually start producing energy. So while the contract runs 20 years, we need that couple of years in the front end in order to have the full term covered. That's why it's 25 years.
Okay. Questions? Mr. Cardenas?
Sure. Thank you. This has been a long time coming. I have some questions, wrote some notes here.
We have one public comment that we'll take after the questions from the council members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to the part where you mentioned in your presentation, contracts and interconnect agreements are standard and non-negotiable, how does that compare to the industry standard on feed-in tariff, whether it's throughout the United States or throughout the world, internationally?
Right. All feed-in tariff contracts are standard to create efficiency.
Now, okay, that's the anticipated model here at LADWP. But my question is
Right.
that the industry standard?
It is the standard in all California utilities. We have looked at every single California utility, and we have looked at agencies throughout the United States that have tariffs, and they are all standard.
Are there any examples where in the infancy stages of feed-in tariffs, they didn't do standard contracts?
Not to our knowledge.
Okay. And then when it comes to the pricing agreement in such a contract, how and when are we going to determine that standard? Because that's the sticky point, in my opinion, because if we hit or miss, then the general ratepayer is going to absorb whether or not we hit the mark or not on what that compensation is for people feeding into our system. Yes.
Right. The experiment, the demonstration program is a competitive piece so that we can allow the market to tell us what the pricing should be. As soon as we gain that information and we start talking about a full-blown program, we will use that information to inform how we want to price. We will also be looking at what the PUC is doing as far as what they're doing with the IOUs as far as pricing. So we're going to use all of that information, and actually that discussion will occur this summer. So we will start working on the full-blown program right after we start getting some competitive information.
So when it comes to the first 10 megawatts, that will not be a standard contract, on the pricing at least.
It's a standard contract on terms, but the price will be the price they tell us they can build it for.
Okay. And go ahead.
Councilmember, I'd like to make a really good clarification.
Could I identify you, please?
Yeah, this is Ron Nichols, General Manager of LA DWP. I would like to make make sure we're really clear about one thing, and that is we are not going to wait until the 10 megawatt units, 10 megawatt demo plants are all installed, which could be many months after that period of time, could easily be a year or more in some cases, depending upon how quickly individual customers do that. We believe we're going to get the information that we need to address this pricing issue after we've gone through the bids and made the selection, so that we're then ready to go. We've got pricing information on that. We will have very good open discussions with the stakeholders, the suppliers, the parties who are interested in putting these on their homes and buildings, as well as this committee and council as appropriate, to talk about that, armed with now that information of real LA market bids here under these conditions. So we're going to move forward very quickly to be able to start ramping up that 75 megawatt program before we even have installations of that demo project plants.
Okay. And when it comes to that same bullet point on the contracts, it mentions the quantity of energy and the length and price will differ. When you talk about length, is that the length of the power line, or you're talking about the length of the actual agreement between the two parties?
It's actually on the length of the agreement, because it may not just be solar. So for example, if it's a biogas plant, per SB 32, we shall allow all eligible renewables. So biogas, maybe they only have enough supply for 10 years. So they will say they only want it for 10 years, for example.
What seems to be the kinds of length of agreements and other feed-in tariffs that are already gotten off the ground throughout the United States?
For solar, it's mostly 20, but per the standard contracts out there for existing feed-in tariff programs, they're 10, 15, and 20 years terms.
15, 20. Okay. And do they tend to have an extension clause already built in, or is it a total renegotiation after that?
I have not seen anything more than 20 years. But again, as Mike mentioned earlier, 20 years was set because that's how long solar has for a warranty. But as we see now, it's getting long and longer. So that may change in the future. But right now, for our program, it'll be 20 years capped.
So very likely the out number on these contracts would be 20 years for now?
Yes.
Okay. And then when it comes to the state legislation, do they dictate whether or not you have to give somebody a minimum number of years of a contract or a maximum?
The minimum is 10.
Okay, so we will not see any 5 or 9 year contracts. We will see a minimum of 10. If if the other party's not willing to commit to 10 years, then technically speaking, whether we wanted to or not, the state is basically trying to hint to us that you don't want to get involved in those contracts, you don't have to. But it doesn't prohibit us, does it?
It doesn't prohibit. It just says you shall offer
At least 10.
at 10, 15, 20.
Okay. And then when it comes to other feed-in tariff programs that have gotten off the ground, have you any evidence of them having shorter than 10-year contracts?
There are some new ones that are being offered right now where I've seen 10 minimum, 10, 15, 20 years.
Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do, please, because I I was a little bit confused about the CAO report on the 150 and 75 megawatt numbers. Is there any reconciling that we need to clarify on that? Because I had to have my staff ask staff, exactly how are we interpreting that, the 150 megawatt?
What we're pointing out there was the reason for the demonstration project, the 10 megawatts, was basically so that they could not only learn from it, but we don't know the rate impact, and we don't know when the rate impact would begin in terms of the talks on the increase on the rates. So since we couldn't tell that, we did look at their timeline, which is this timeline here. And as you see on their timeline, they have the 10 megawatts, the 15, the 25, and the 25, which would ramp them up to 150. So we were trying to interpret their timeline to say that a minimum of time would be required for the offering, which they have there, and then through to completion. It was not a comment on how long it would take them to process, but to get any item through to completion. And so we were dividing it up, and what the DWP was referring to was the application just portion of it, whereas we were talking about through to completion of any project.
Okay, so,
And that's why we were talking about the 25-year requirement as opposed to the 20 when it was actually going to be running.
okay, so basically the CAO report uses dates of 2014 and 2016
Which are the end dates here on the timeline.
for the first 75,000 megawatts.
Yes.
And then if the department gets started on the next 75,000, then that would lead into future dates.
Right.
But it could be commenced somewhere before
It could be before.
2016.
Right, actually,
before.
yeah, the dialogue really could be, do we want to double the offering in the early years and make that 30 and 50 and 50, and then the actual delivery of 150 megawatts by 2016. So that'll be part of the dialogue as we think about a full-blown FIT program, whether it's 75, 150, or somewhere in between.
If I could add on to that, Councilmember, we had, previously before this committee, we had presented some information about what our current estimates, this is estimates without the benefit of the outcome of the 10 megawatt demonstration program, at a 75 megawatt program versus a 150 megawatt program, just what does doubling down effectively do? And we were looking at a residential customer cost. In other words, paying the overall cost to all residential customers to paying for the program was estimated to be about 25 cents by the full 75 megawatt build out, and about 52 cents if we went to 150 megawatts.
Per month?
Per month. 52 cents per month is being what the cost to put all this into our rates and allocate the cost of the feed-in tariff. We're going to know more when we have that 10
Right.
megawatt, and as a result, we can trigger that up ramp more quickly, and we'll do that with whatever we would do with that with full discussion before council on that matter.
Right, that's why, and the 10 megawatts, they can absorb right now because it's a minimal impact on their budget. So they don't need an increase right now to do the 10 megawatts.
Okay. I'll also, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the department for following through with a timeline of reporting to us. It wasn't always the case that the Department of Water and Power would actually commit to a timeline of reporting to the council, and now it looks like, certainly on this matter, they've been very, very honest about how soon they could be ready to report, and they followed that commitment. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, just to be clear, after all those questions were asked, are we expecting it to be at 75 megawatts by 2014?
I think we're required to, aren't we?
No, the SB 32 requirements is to offer a program of at least 75 megawatts. It does not set a timeline of when those megawatts actually have to be installed.
So we just have to have a program
Right.
on paper in existence?
The SB 32, although they don't have any enforcement mechanism, they certainly want to have a program that works, and we want a program that works because we have renewables targets that we must comply with. So it's important. And the 2016 date is actually a very important date, because right now, federal subsidies end in 2016. So to the greatest extent that solar can be built prior to that date, it may be much more cost-effective for the city as developers take advantage of those subsidies.
So do we expect to actually be at 150 megawatts by 2016?
It really depends on the discussion as far as how large a program we want. We will target 75 megawatts, and we'll have a discussion whether 150 is appropriate and have that discussion as part of race discussions. But DWP fully intends to be successful. We are counting on this program to help us comply with SB 2-1X requirements for renewables.
So the 75 megawatts, are we hoping to actually have that in place by 2014? Or are we just talking about having the contract on paper and meeting the requirements by 2014?
Once we decide what the full program is going to be in the timeline, if that is 2014, that's one answer. If we decide to have it all done by 2016, it's another answer. But whatever we decide for the full program, we fully intend to make that happen and be accountable to those goals.
By 2016?
Right now, we've proposed 2016 for the 75 megawatt program, but that is totally up for discussion. That's not a commitment by Water and Power at this point at all to say that that's locked in stone.
Although if the tax credits expire, I assume we're committed to try to do this in a cost-effective way, so why would we wait till after they've expired?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, first of all, I think it would be prudent for both us as the department and for the council to get the pricing information that we'll have and be able to sit down and talk in real pricing terms this summer. We'll have that. We'll be able to go through that. We'll be able to march out, here's the cost, here's the associated difference of doing that by 2014 or 2016. So we're not trying to be avoiding the question. The answer is, until we have that information, I really can't provide you a firm, hard answer on that. The reality is, if you were to take a look at what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years on solar prices, if that continues on, you could take a look and say, well, if that pricing continues to go down, would we be better to stretch that out a little bit and then accelerate to get up to 150 megawatts by 2016, because we'll get net cheaper pricing? You know, that's the type of discussion I want to have with this committee this summer, aimed in part. Now, we're not going to have a crystal ball on what pricing is 3 years from now, but we are going to have a very good idea of what the pricing point begins with right now. And I think that will be an important information point for all of us to make a decision on how quickly not only do we ramp up to 75, but how quickly do we decide to go ahead above and ramp on up to 150. And we'll have a very open discussion with that. We'll make a decision on that, and we'll be able to do it in a manner that, by virtue of having that information this summer, we can make that decision without compromising our ability to get to 150 megawatts if that's what we collectively decide is a good thing to do.
And obviously, this could be a big factor in terms of local economic development. There's a lot of jobs we're talking about. What's our current estimate for the number of jobs this would create? Or do we have an estimate?
Actually, don't have a hard and fast estimate on that right now.
Do you even have a wild out of the ballpark guess?
It's
Our mathematician's working on it.
And I know you've met with labor unions. Are these going to be union jobs? Are they going to be living wage jobs? And what's the outlook for these jobs?
We do have the living wage.
Right.
So the provision in the contract is that we do require, the city requires living wage. There's an ordinance on that, and these contracts will have to abide by that.
How about any kind of union connection? Is there any?
These projects are by our customers.
Yeah.
So they're going to be making their own choices on who they hire to build these projects, for them.
But whomever they hire, they have to follow our living wage.
That is
requirements.
correct.
exactly.
Okay.
And I would point out, in addition, when we worked through some of the safety provisions associated with this, we had input by IBW to make certain that the safety requirements that we're requiring for the installation and operation of these facilities match the same as though they were done by ourselves.
So what was the feedback you got from labor on safety and other issues?
Just that there were some specific provisions, and I could have others amplify on this, but specific provisions with regard to our metering and burner requirements, turn-off switches, and the like on the equipment, so that when we have our field crews out there dealing with this, they're protected, and through the installation and the energization and the testing of it, the installers who are doing this are protected and safe and meeting standard code requirements.
And we're going to make sure that the installers are trained and certified, because they are dealing with the electric grid and going to be feeding directly into our system. And so that's another way of making sure that the quality is of sufficient level.
And do we have any ability to control the hiring in any way to make it local hiring to some degree? It's a lot of jobs, and it would be good if we found some way to increase the number of LA residents that were hired.
Councilmember, I'm unaware of any, and I'm not an attorney and I'm not pretend to be one here, but based on discussions that we've had with council on this issue more broadly, I'm unaware of any basis that we have to require that as a condition of this.
So we don't think legally we have any ability to do that?
That's what I have been told by council.
Thank you.
Legal counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Correct. Mr. Zine.
Thank you. Ron, I have great confidence in your integrity, and when you say something, you deliver the product that you promised to deliver, and it's a refreshing environment to work under. And as a council member, to have that confidence in you that when you say it's going to be done, it's going to be done. So I appreciate that. Is the Ratepayer Advocate going to be involved in this at all?
Well, to the extent that, and with regard to the costs that would be included as part of our future rates going forward, we would anticipate that he would review that, yes.
Okay. And it was mentioned 30 cents a kilowatt hour. What's the current cost kilowatt hour?
Well,
it was mentioned 30 cents, that under this program, it'd be 30 cent kilowatt hour. That's what they would cost it out to be. How does that compare to what we're paying now kilowatt hour?
So the kilowatt hour cost is really a range depending on the size of the project. So very, very, very large projects are in the neighborhood of $100. But these are hundreds of megawatt projects. A very, very small project on a rooftop is very, very close to somewhere in the 26 to 28 cent range, $260 to $280 range for a small rooftop project. Like in a multifamily dwelling, 30 kilowatts is going to be much more expensive.
But how does that compare to our current electric rates?
Oh, our rates themselves?
Well, we're talking, I'm trying to compare
our average residential rates are on the order of 13 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay, 13 cents. So it would be a considerable.
But that's everything. That's power supply, that's the distribution system, that's meter reading, that's everything.
Everything.
Right.
Okay. And you mentioned solar, Senate Bill 32. Comes up to mind a company that basically took a lot of money away from the federal government, Solyndra. How do we know that people we're dealing with are not going to do what was done to the federal government?
Well, I think it's a different circumstance, and not that I'm a student of the full issues around Solyndra, but the differentiation is Solyndra was obtaining a government loan guarantee and grant associated with paying for them to create a manufacturing facility.
Right.
In this instance, we're simply entering into a contract for someone to install a photovoltaic facility on their home or business roof and sell a certain amount of energy to us over a 20-year period of time. They have to meet the standards for doing that, they have to meet the safety standards for doing that. It has to get inspected by building and safety with regard to meeting codes, and inspected by us with respect to its metering and safety issues. But where they buy that equipment, how they buy that equipment, we're not paying anything different, irrespective of where it comes from. It's a performance contract that they have to perform on.
But then how do we assure the consumer, like you buy an electrical cord, it has the underwriters, it's got a stamp approval. How do we assure the consumer that, they want to participate, they want to save the planet, along with the rest of us, that this is a reputable company, because there's scams all over the place? How do we put assurance to the consumer that this is a reputable company and that you can go to fly-by-night or you can go to somebody reputable?
Okay.
Is there some stamp of approval or something that we can assure as we move forward?
Yes,
We did yesterday, we talked about animals, and we talked
Right.
about the shelters where they have the stamp of approval. Like you go to a restaurant, you get an A rating or you get an F rating. You're not going to go
Right.
eat an F restaurant. How do we do that?
So in our guidelines that we have, all of the equipment that these generators are made up of have to be from a certified list. So they've already been approved, and these companies have been in, operation for many years.
So there's no fly-by-nights involved.
No.
So we need to protect the consumer as we move forward, since they're going to contract out, they're going to get the equipment. It's like I hate seeing people get ripped off.
Right. The only thing that we can't control as far as a fly-by-night are maybe the installers themselves, but the actual equipment is from a certified
Well,
list.
then how do
To
we,
comment on the installers themselves.
Yeah, how do we-
Is that the solar incentive program has matured tremendously over the last 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And so we do see the installers becoming much more efficient. The projects that are proposed are getting done. And so I wouldn't say there's a consolidation in the industry, but certainly a professionalism that has really permeated the industry over the last couple of years. And these installers who are working on the solar incentive program are going to move right over and work on the feed-in tariff program.
Right. And also another provision in the feed-in tariff program is the applicant must show experience on a project of similar technology and size.
and how do we verify that?
There's forms that we have, and they have to fill in the information, show us proof, which project did you work on, what size was that project? And we will have to do due diligence to follow up on that to make sure. And again, as I stated earlier, we want to make sure that we can count on the generation from these sites for our RPS goals.
Right. No, and I agree that I support all the concept. I just want to make sure that the consumer that entrusts that we're doing something to their benefit, the benefit of greening Los Angeles, isn't going to end up getting some sham company that comes in and the installer doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, you can go out and get a professional painter to paint your house, or you can get some guy off the corner to paint your house, and, there's a difference in the quality and the craftsmanship. When you're talking about electrical power, there's a whole other arena that you have to deal with, the licensing, the inspection, make sure that they're doing it, because you're talking with some dangerous type of consequences. So I just want to make sure that we move forward, we have some assurances to the consumer, so they're not only getting ripped off financially, but it's a competent, qualified,
Councilman Zine.
reputable company.
Councilman Zine, Olivia Sevis-Villalonger from CAO. I've sat down with the DWP, and the vetting process that they have, the pink portion,
Yes.
it's a competitive process as to who these applicants are. And they do look at things like their experience and what they put together. It's not a fly-by-night. They're not going to grant it to everybody.
They needed water and power?
Yes.
Okay.
Water and Power is going to vet everybody.
Okay.
They're not just going to grant it to everybody that goes through.
Okay.
Yeah, so they are going to vet all of that. They're not going to be just anybody.
So then we protect the consumer at
Right.
the same time we do what we need to do.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilman, I do want to make one thing clear, because I think it's important. We have done what we can do in the four square corners of our application process and our contracts to establish good industry practices, requirements, screening requirements, to do as best as we can reasonably do, and still be commercially practical and have an agreement, because there are those who have said we would like to have a 2-page agreement, please. So we're trying to get a good balance on that. But at the end of the day, it's not, DWP isn't going to be guaranteeing the performance of whoever that contractor is. We're trying to raise the bar, we're trying to lay out the requirements, and we're trying to do as best we can to try to protect our customers and the consumer on this. But at the end of the day, they do have to choose wisely, and we can't guarantee the actual performance of their contractor.
But we can give them some guidance.
We are giving as much guidance as we reasonably believe that we can do in a way that's fair to all applicants.
Because when they go sideways, they don't come to you, they complain to us.
Well, they come to both of us, I think, sir. I would if I could, because we actually do have a number that Councilmember Koretz had requested. Our estimate is that for 75 megawatts, we have about 2,400 job years for that, and it doubles that, just doubles that if it's 150 megawatts to about 4,800 job years associated with that level of commitment.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions to summarize. So, briefly, how will this be funded?
From the department's perspective, this comes just like any other expenditure we make. It comes out of the revenue that comes from rates paid by our customers, and we will budget this just like we do other power purchase parts in our out of our power revenue.
And so what we're doing
department.
what we're doing here is we're putting a long-term commitment to this. So we're going to be planning for this in every budget from here on for another 25 years, and we're just clear with that.
We are, but the important point here is this is a pay for performance. We pay per kilowatt hour produced. It doesn't produce, we don't pay.
Gotcha. Okay, and finally, the ordinance is granting the DWP board and general manager the authority to enter into these contracts without any direct council involvement. What is the council's oversight role in this, if any, after we approve the ordinance?
Well, certainly we'll be reporting back to you on the performance that we're getting out of these, and periodically be talking about where's our program, how we're coming along on this, what are we getting in the way of energy delivered for this. We'll certainly report periodically just the contracts that we're signing up. As we talked about when we first came before you on this issue, we said we would periodically come and tell you, where are we? So if we have a 75 megawatt, we have a 150 megawatt program, we'll be periodically coming back and telling you, where are you along that curve? What do the costs look like, and how is this measuring up compared to what we expected it to be?
I think we're all new council members here, all right? That's new, so we're all new. Were you on it with?
I've been on this.
He's on this forever.
Okay, so we have one new council member.
Forever.
No, we have one new existing.
One
council. We're all-
experienced council
On the
member.
committee. And
He's
so,
experienced.
when you say that, as you explained to us in previous times, you've got to remember there's 4 of us who are new to this committee, so.
The CAO recommends that they report every 6 months. You can make it sooner than that. You can make it every quarter. But we recommend it every 6
To
months.
amend this, to do it every quarter, that we get an update on this. So when should we approve this?
And we would be fine with that.
Okay.
Certainly understand.
Mr. Cardenas?
Yeah, I was just going to ask the question. You mentioned that on the first 10 megawatts, even before installation occurs, you will have been able to understand what you've been able to negotiate, what the market will bear, and what the push and pull is on those numbers. So I was hoping that we could get in the first report back in the next quarter, if we could get that as part of the discussion as to whether or not you were able to ascertain what that relative number is, because the point of that you were making to us, I presume, is that will tell us that we're ready to go on the second 65 megawatts.
Correct.
You get what I'm saying? Because the first 10 is part of the first 75.
Correct.
Okay.
And yes, we have, I would anticipate that we're going to have I would anticipate we'll have a special reporting on this, out of that 10 megawatt program. Here's what we were looking for, here's what we got, here's what lessons learned from this, and come back and say, our recommendations based on what we've learned is to go forward on this and have not just a reporting to you, but I anticipate we'll have some workshops where we're discussing this matter for stakeholders before we even come back and report on it.
So does July sound like a realistic month in which you can make that report, or would it most likely be August, or?
It'd be closer to August, so we can actually get the bids back and go through the initial processing with the interconnection, so about August timeframe.
So if everything goes as planned, we go through with this, and you exercise your authority, then sometime in the month of August, you hope to be able to give us that exciting report about what the market told us.
We'll think it's exciting, but others may not.
I think it is. I think it is, because that, with all due respect, folks, that's the scary part in all this.
Yes.
Because once we hit that number, our Department of Water and Power is going to be signing contracts up to 20 years at a time, and then whether we like it or not, and the price goes down on their end, on the people that we're agreeing to, the price goes down on their end, we are still going to pay them that amount. And when I say we, it's not, I mean, I'm a customer, but it's going to be the average customer in the city is going to be absorbing a portion of that. It's going to be blended into our rate. And the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't, I don't agree that we should be flippant about hitting the mark on that number, because the people taking advantage of it, it should be a business agreement, and it should be fair. And then if we miss that mark, then we're going to be unfair. Unfortunately, inadvertently, we're going to be unfair to the rest of our customers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation would be to approve the proposed ordinance as submitted by the city attorney relative to amending the administrative code to allow the DWP board and general manager to enter into long-term standard offer renewable power purchase agreements as specified, and request the DWP to report on a quarterly basis as to the status of the feed-in tariff program, number of applicants, installations, megawatts installed in compliance with SB 32, and report back on the price point
In August.
in August. Okay?
Any technical changes, Mr. Chairman, on the CAO's report? No? Okay, it's all good.
We have one public speaker. Okay. Thank you very much. If we could make room for the speaker, any one of those chairs. Thank you for your presentation. Mary Leslie.
Can we have Jack?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the council committee today for all the good questions and for all the hard work that you've done. I know some of you are new, and that you're new, Mr. Chairman, but this issue is not new. This issue has been discussed, as Councilman Cardenas mentioned, for the last year and a half, and I think it was extremely well vetted. I mean, two of our major universities, USC and UCLA, have both reviewed and done the basic work on this project, as well as several top consulting firms, both Navigant, PA, E3, have all looked at the program. And so I think at this point, other utilities, municipal utilities, have begun their feed-in tariffs. Sacramento has over a 100-megawatt program that they started over a year and a half ago to good result. So I think the key is your concern is that a fair price is paid. And I think I want to thank Ron Nichols and his team, because I think they've worked really hard at making this a very fair process. And I think the demonstration will reveal, we're hoping, a fair price, and we're hoping it will demonstrate good geographic distribution in the city, and that the different size rooftops will all be part of that demonstration, so that we'll have a good sense of what the warehouse, retail, multifamily market looks like in LA as the program rolls out. But I think the reason why business likes the program and why there's a broad-based coalition for this program is because it creates jobs fast. It makes a major investment in LA. We're in a situation where we don't have millions of dollars being invested every day here for different programs. This particular program, 150 megawatts, would garner over $500 million worth of private investment. And as Ron Nichols said, it would generate over 4,500 jobs. It will also reduce 2 million metric tons of CO2. So that's very significant in terms of environmental issues in Los Angeles. So with that, I'm here to support the ordinance, that we think that you should give them the authority to move forward, and so that we can really see if this program can work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Mary, I don't know if you have the answer to this question, but you mentioned Sacramento. They already embarked on a 100-megawatt program in Sacramento with that municipal authority, right? What is the price range or price point that they arrived at there? Can you come up to the mic?
For solar, it's approximately 14.5 cents, but those systems tend to be larger, 5 megawatt in size.
And any other examples from Sacramento that help us?
No, they had a flat pricing, but of course it had time of delivery to incorporate other factors, but the average pricing was 14.5.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I have to ask this question. Had Sacramento or us done this 2 years ago, would we very likely have come at a price point higher than 14.5 cents?
Well, what happened was SMUD, Sacramento
Municipal.
rolled out this program over a year and a half, and they sold out within a week. But what happened was, projects didn't get built until recently. So now that pricing has dropped, we have been told about 40 megawatts of installations are actually in place right now. So again, that's why I mentioned earlier, we didn't want a program in name only. We wanted a program where people actually build the
So
projects.
are you saying that our LA Department of Water and Power is challenging itself to not only sign contracts, but to encourage and help and assist that we actually get power online from those contracts as soon as possible?
Yes.
All the DWP folk are nodding their head. Is there a little bit of pride involved in this whole thing here? Okay. That's good to hear. You're vested, emotionally and in every other way.
Let the record reflect that the first row here is filled with smiles.
We need a photo.
At the end. I don't know why.
He came around.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leslie. So we'll, without objection, approved as recommended. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have a few more items, and we have a couple of colleagues that need to leave, so we will go through these briefly unless there's a real issue with any of them. The next item, please.
Item number 3 relates to DWP report relative to proposed amendment number 1, existing contract with Logica North America to extend software support services. This increases the contract amount by, I believe, $890,000.
I have a quick question. If you could come up. What's the total cost of this contract, and will we be seeing any more amendments?
First off, there will be no more amendments. This is the one and only for this agreement, and the agreement amount is...
Well, it seems like there's been a few amendments, hasn't? This is the first and only?
This is the first and only to this agreement. This agreement amount is $5,521,430. And this will bring it up to $6,410,594. It does not affect the term, so it will term out in approximately 1 year.
These were unanticipated costs, or how, or it's not an option, they were unanticipated costs, and this will be the final amendment?
Yes.
And staff has thoroughly reviewed this?
Yep.
And we absolutely need this?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I just want to point out, it's very rare to have software and/or contracts like this that go unamended for 5-year periods. At every level of government, I've seen these kinds of amendment after amendment after amendment. So that just goes to show that hopefully that's a sign that we're getting better at making these contracts with these third parties, because in some cases, software contracts and contracts of this nature have doubled and tripled just in a matter of a couple of years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So with no objection, we'll move that item.
Recommend approval.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Item number 4, also DWP report relative to proposed amendment number 1, to existing agreement with Northwest Pipe Company to increase the delivery period by an additional 3 years. We also have a report from the CAO's office.
Okay, we are, unless there are any pertinent questions or comments, we will move by Mr. Zine, seconded by Mr. Cardenas.
Okay.
No
Approved.
objections? So ordered.
Okay.
Next item.
Number 5, CAO report and ordinance relative to the issuance of Los Angeles wastewater system fixed-rate revenue refunding bonds. Mr. Rai Pagat from the CAO's office is here to present the matter.
Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you. I know the department is using the pool that was approved as to who are going to handle these bonds on behalf of the city. Has the department determined what positions each one of the brokers are going to handle, who's going to be senior, who's going to be co, et cetera? Have you determined that?
Yes, Sarai Bago at the CAO's office. For the first transaction, we have a swap termination, senior managed by Barclays, co-managed by Stone and Youngberg. For the second transaction, we have an advanced refunding, and that is senior managed by JP Morgan and co-managed by Jeffries and Loop. And for the tender option...
I'm sorry, that one is Jeffries and Loop?
And Loop.
Okay.
And for the tender option, that is senior managed by De La Rosa and co-managed by Wells Fargo.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With no objection, we'll move this item.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next item.
Number 6, Department of General Services report relative to the Carl Moyer Program Mobile Source Air Pollution Grants, and this is authority to apply for these grants. this is an authority that was primarily maintained by the Environmental Affairs Department until their disbandment. Now it's handled by the departments directly.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, moved by Mr. Koretz, seconded by Mr. Zine. No objections? So ordered. Thank you.
Please, your agenda. With exception of public comment.
Any general public comment?
No general public comment? Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Oh, good. We did it in an hour. An hour's good. An hour.
All right, see you guys. How are you? Actually, I'm not. I'll be around. I'll be around. Okay. Last one, you guys do. Let's go to remember that. Now that this is really great hearing. Just check the he's gonna know. His file now. Can you check the file on these cities? He's, you know, when we step up, so I guess we're next week on the but it's also yeah, he's going to be whenever I okay, so we need like a quick thank you very much, sir. And Martin.
Thanks, man. No problem, sir. Good. No. Coming on, all right, good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, sir.